Today we're going to be looking at Manic Panic in the color Mystic Heather. So first thing you might notice is that my swatches are labeled 1 through 12. I do just want to say that is not synonymous with hair levels. Basically, I do different video clips and pictures and such throughout the video, so the numbers just help us keep track of each swatch. These are human hair swatches, but they are not virgin hair, so they've been chemically colored, treated, or bleached at some point in their lifetimes. 1 is green. Oftentimes when I do purples and pinks, I get a lot of requests to do green swatches, so that's what that's for. 2 is gray, 3 is a natural red, 4 is a soft black, and then 4 to 11 is a range that goes to platinum blonde, and then 12 is like a tone version of number 11. So to start, I'm going to take the color directly from the container and I will put it at the top of each swatch. Then some people do like to dilute their dyes, so I will do a diluted version at the bottom of each swatch. Please keep in mind, everyone's hair is different, which means everyone's hair will take color differently. Plus different screens and monitors can make colors look different, so please just use my video as a reference for how this could possibly maybe turn out for you. Never broke a bone, so I'm gonna try hard to prove you wrong, that I'm not who I used to be. I'm not living at 17. Let's go. Feet away, she's like a primrose. You're never taking me alive, so come close. And I know why you said it, 'cause I'm reading every word in your voice. For the diluted section, we are doing a 4:1 ratio. So that's going to be 1 part of our dye to 4 parts diluter. I do get questions about what diluter is, so I just give a really quick, simple answer. It's basically something that lightens the color of a semi-permanent dye. Now, usually most brands will sell their own version of a diluter. That can be really nice to use because it will keep the same consistency. But since I do so many different brands and colors between my videos, I like to use a plain white conditioner as my diluter. All right, I'm gonna let these sit for about 3 hours just to let the color fully absorb. I will then rinse it out, and when it's dry, I will meet you back here and we can do some comparisons. So before we get too far into this, I again just want to remind everyone that my swatches are not virgin hair. Virgin hair tends to be less porous, which means it'll have a harder time absorbing and holding on to color. So especially with colors like this is not necessarily a pastel, but I can just tell, especially by looking at how it diluted, that it's definitely meant to be put on lighter hair. So even though there is a difference on some of the darker swatches, I wouldn't recommend it, especially if your hair is virgin. So 1 was originally green. The direct eye portion is quite interesting. It's very muted and much more cool tone, I would say, than like the lighter swatches. I still think that if your hair is green, you might want to try and get it a little bit lighter than this just in case. But overall, it did cover better than I expected it to. Now, when it comes to the diluted section for all of them, I realized I probably should have diluted this less than I did. So the green still looks pretty green on the bottom. It just probably looks a little less green than it did before. It kind of made it look a little bit more dusty and a little less vibrant than it used to. 2 was the gray. Again, that one also looks more cool toned. Not quite as cool toned as the number 1 where it's like super dusty. And honestly, there is a little bit of like a muted quality to it as well. It's just next to the green one, it just doesn't look quite as muted, but next to the blonde, it definitely does look a little less saturated. And then the bottom half, that one looks like a slightly more pinky version of what it used to be. 3 was the natural red. I actually really like how it turned out on the top for that one. The natural red tones definitely played a role because I still see a lot of warmth. It just darkened it a little bit and I think put it closer to a more purpley undertone. The diluted section, I don't see a difference. There might be a very slight difference, but I don't see one. For number 4, I don't see a difference. Number 5, there is a very, very, very minimal difference on the top. I think the undertone looks a little bit more pinky, but it's so minuscule, especially as like I was saying, if you have this dark of hair, it's probably pointless to try. I mean, you can always try, but I think I'd recommend something a little bit more pigmented. Even 6 and 7, again, there is like a slight difference from how it used to be, but it's very minimal. I would say 6 still kind of has that brown look. It's just the undertone, again, is a little bit more pinky. 7, you start to see more of the purple coming through, but it doesn't look quite as intentional, especially seeing the number 8 next to it. It just kind of looks like you can't see as much color on there. 8, 9, and 10 all turned out kind of similar, with it getting more and more saturated as it gets brighter, with 11 being probably the most bright looking. I would say if your hair is any darker than the platinum, I would still just try a strand test just in case, see how your hair absorbs, because some people's hair doesn't absorb color as well as some other people's. But I would say over the slightly darker blonde swatches, the color kind of looks not necessarily muted, but a little more natural. I think it's some of the brownish tones coming through a bit that kind of give it that look. On the diluted section for 10, I don't see a big difference. There might be a slight undertone difference. 9, I can see a little bit more pink coming through on the diluted section, and then 10, I see it better with it being the most visible on number 11. And then 12 being the toned swatch, it does look kind of in between the 11 and 2 as normal. It does look a little bit darker than it does on the number 11, but a little bit more muted as well. Now I will say with colors that have purple in them, especially when they're pastels, if your hair turns very yellow when you lighten it, I would recommend probably toning it as much as you can. Usually the purples in a color will try to neutralize those yellow tones, and so a color like this might turn out more pink on your hair if it does go very yellow. And if you want to have those more purpley tones, I would attempt to tone it if possible. Now, as for comparisons, I don't have any quite like this. So we'll compare my most similar colors that I do have, starting with Arctic Fox in the color Violet Dream. This is comparable to number 12, 11, 10, and 9. Now I know looking at this, it's not really that similar. In my mind, I was thinking about colors that I have that are on the like spectrum of pink and purple, where they're kind of falling in between, and Violet Dream came to mind. I would say that the Mystic Heather definitely leans much more purple, even though it is a very warm toned purple, but it is much lighter. The Violet Dream seems to be a lot more pigmented, so if you have hair that's struggles to lighten up or not as porous, something like the Violet Dream might give you a better result, even though it's not exactly really the same as the Mystic Heather. I think on like the number 9 swatch, the undertones look a little bit more similar because you lose some of that purple from the Mystic Heather versus as it gets lighter, but I thought this could still be something interesting in case someone was curious out there. The other comparison I wanted to look at today is Lime Crime in the color Pony. This is comparable to number 12, 11, 10, and 9. So quickly I want to say that Pony is one of the colors I did a little bit earlier on in my channel. So I used to do 2 separate diluted parts, this and this, I believe. So the very, very top is going to be the direct dye portion. So the swatches also in color aren't super exact from what they used to be, but you can still kind of see the range in which they give. Now Pony, I would say, is definitely my most similar comparison, but it is a little bit darker. So I think, again, it means it's just a little bit more pigmented, but even just looking at how it looks on the number 10, I'm thinking that these types of purples in particular are probably harder to make super pigmented. So I'd recommend them both to be on as light of hair as possible, but the Pony being a little bit darker, you might get a better result if you have hair that you struggle to color with, considering the Mystic Heather does seem to be a little bit more on the pastel end, but it's obviously all preference because they are not exactly the same. If you've ever used Mystic Heather in your hair, please feel free to let everyone know how it took to your hair and how it faded and all that jazz. Alright, now I'd like to look at the before and after clips. Those, as well as anything past this point in the video, will all be done in natural lighting.
Grew up in the same neighborhood. That's how to rub salt in the wound. Spend a few hours on the reservoir. Never broke a bone, so I'm gonna try hard to prove you wrong. That I'm not who I used to be. I'm not living at 17. Let's go. Feet away, she's like a primrose. You're never taking me alive, so come close. And I know why you said it, 'cause I'm reading every word in your voice. Now I'm not who I used to be. And maybe it's a good thing, got a good thing coming, it's a good thing that we're not who we used to be. Sometimes I'm a loner. I wish that you lived closer. Maybe then I feel alright. Sometimes I get strung out trying to be myself. When you come close, I feel alive. Maybe that's a good thing.
I hope my video helped. If you have a request, I do have a link below to a Google form you can fill out. Just remember, I only do brands that do not test on animals. Thank you so very, very much to my patrons, and thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.